Think forward. Think Research Channel.
The struggle to balance worldly desires and demands against the promises and hopes of life in the afterworld defines the essence of secularism in modern-day Turkey. Located on a pathway between cultures in Eurasia, Turkey claims to be the only secular country in the region with a 99% Muslim majority. Today, the 80-year-old social experiment of the Turkish Republic is facing many challenges to build her own identity, looking back to a rich history while marching forward into contemporary times. What are the benefits, costs, and risks associated with the Turkish way of secularism? How does the Turkish formula affect gender issues, politics, state civil society relations, and the economy? Can Turkey offer an alternative answer for a secular system with a tolerant society for the rest of the world? The debate on secular ideals and religious convictions continues today, not only in the social level, but also in the political arena. Contemporary Turkish politics constitutes an illuminating case study for secularism as well as its costs and benefits.
So in the Turkish case, we have these two traditions, one more Republican in the European sense, Republican secularist, or Jacobin, as many social scientists refer in relation to the French case, more state authoritarian. And the second tradition, political tradition, is more conservative and democrat.
Any major ideological divide tends to continue and tends to fuel further disagreements in Turkish political culture. So, secularism versus religion is one of those.
The current Turkish government of Justice and Development, AK Party, claims to have struck a balance in administrating the state matters with a secular mindset while representing conservative values.
It's unusual that in Turkey, of all places, you would have a government that is now sort of representative of a combination of secularism and Islam that is very moderate. You have moderate Muslims working within the secular political system. It's an interesting experiment.
In November of 2002, the conservative Democrat AK Party won the national elections with 34% of the vote. This success granted the AK Party government the majority of the seats in the parliament, while the left-wing Republican People's Party became the minority oppositional party with 19% of the ballots. As no other party was able to pass the 10% minimum voting threshold, the current parliament has only two parties and a few independents.
They won the elections because they were representative of the conservative and more liberal or more democrat circles. So people who voted for them are not all Islamists, not even religious people.
It wasn't just the poor, it wasn't just the really conservative rural population that you would tend to associate with an Islamist movement, but rather it was a kind of new middle class and professional class.
When you look at what the movement has come down to, again, that's a very, very interesting example of how the Islamic movement itself was quote-unquote tamed, let's say, by the democratic process, by the very logic of democracy.
Of all the political leaders in the past half century in Turkey, they are the ones who are making an effort at least to tell the public that they are not contrary to the state elite, that in fact they are willing and wishing to enter into debate and a common understanding of issues with the state elite.
Radical Islamism is transformed to something more pluralistic. We can even consider the leader of the political party as an ex-Islamist, right? So in a way, they took a kind of distance from the original radical project of Islamism as a total project, as something that should englobe the whole system and the power and the state. And whereas now they move into a kind of more mainstream center conservative party.
While the political Islamic movement was becoming more and more moderate and mainstream, the rest of the political parties, basing their policies on authoritarian secularism, were separating themselves further apart from the Turkish society in the process.
Çünkü kurtuluş savaşı lazım bu ülkeye. Bu ülkeye gerçek bir kurtuluş savaşı lazım.
Belki İslamcılıktan daha Müslümanlığa doğru bir gidiş görüyoruz. Tabii bu tek toplum eğer çatışmaların sergilendiği bir sahne ise bu dönüşüm tabii sadece İslami kesim dönüşümüne bağlı değil. Daha laik kesimlerin, seküler kesimlerin, Türkiye'deki çok güçlü kurumların da dönüşümüyle olacak bir şey.
Center-right and center-left parties located in this state-centric politics have been unable to learn about the changes, learn the sort of different problems and transformations in society. I think the Islamic parties, because they are supposed to be embedded in society, and they cannot embed themselves into the state because of the laicist and secular nature of the state, and they learn this process, what to do, how to do this politics.
Welfare Party and the other AK Party, first of all, they understood sociologically the Turkish society better. That means the family vote. And to touch the family vote, you have to also be in touch with women and interior spaces, so they made door-to-door kind of campaign. And for that, you need women as well.
So the party was allowing them to work in the public realm, use their skills or education or experience they had gathered throughout their education, and give them an opportunity to be part of public life.
This is not to say it's without its problems. So although there are many women active in what was called the Islamist movement and now is a more personalized kind of Islam in politics, there are many women involved in developing that, but there are not that many women in parliament, not just in the Muslim oriented parties, but in any party in Turkey.
The key issue and the key is the women. But who will have the key?
It is difficult to assess if this fusion offered by the current government will result with a more pluralistic and tolerant state system than its predecessors from the Ottoman and early Republican times.
The secularists thought that if we can ban the headscarf from all public places like the government and the civil service and schools and so on, that eventually people will become secular. It's a kind of notion that if you change the environment within which people live, you make them wear certain kinds of clothes, behave a certain way, that they'll become that way. And that really didn't work. So the question is, will the public Muslims go the same direction? There's a tendency to think that that's something that might work. And so there was talk, for instance, about among the public Muslims about talking, they talked about whether they should ban the consumption of alcohol in public places because it might offend some people who would be passing through those public places who didn't approve. But that's the same kind of thing. It's also social engineering, and it's a non-liberal, non-pluralist approach that some would say is not tolerant of differences.
How much does the zero-sum game in the political arena translate to the societal relations between people with secular, Islamic, or alternative lifestyles?
I don't think that the majority of the Turkish people are basically divided one way or the other.
When you talk to the people involved, talk to the people with the headscarves, you see actually that the polarization is artificial, is superficial, that it needs to be deconstructed because there has been so much of self-definition of one through the other. The headscarf girls define themselves with reference to the values that so-called secularists who are opposed to them try to define themselves with.
At the sociological level, the wall between secularist elites and middle classes and the others, Muslims, or let's say more religious people, are getting thinner since 1980s. It started since 1950s, but especially during the last 2 decades.
In February 1999, at the height of political division between the secularists and Islamists, Professor Binnaz Toprak co-authored a study to analyze the relationship between religiosity on the one hand and socio-political attitudes and behavior in Turkey on the other.
There was this great polarization, so we were interested to see if this polarization was real as far as the men on the street or the women on the street were concerned, and what we found is that it really is not.
97% of the study sample replied to the question, "Which religion do you belong to?" as Islam, while only 3% claimed that they do not believe in any religion at all. The answers about the religious habits in daily life demonstrate that the majority of the Turkish population not only are believers, but also practice their religion on a daily basis.
Turkish people are religious, but when you ask them how religious, those who say they're very religious or not religious at all are really in the margins.
In response to a number of questions about the secular versus Islamic polarization in the society, the study reveals that if the individual is a believer in God and the Prophet, the society is tolerant towards different levels of religiosity and religious practice.
What this revealed is that what's important for Muslims in this country is that you're a believer, but whether you practice it or not, whether you pray, whether you fast during Ramadan, or whether you cover your head is not altogether that important.
Another outcome of the survey portrays the attitudes of the Turkish population about the role of religion in the public sphere, such as the judiciary or legislative branches of the Turkish nation-state.
The majority are Muslim, and yet what comes out is that they see religion as a private affair.
61% of the population believes that there should be no parties in Turkish political life based on religion, while 20% of the respondents, a significant amount, expressed that they would like to see an Islamic state based on Sharia laws.
When you try to understand how they see Islam, they see it in the most secular terms. They see in Islam where polygamy is really not quite possible. So there's clearly a misunderstanding. There's clearly a vague understanding of what Sharia is.
In fact, When asked further detailed questions whether a man should be allowed to marry up to 4 wives as a consequence of Sharia laws, 85% did not agree with this proposition. Thus, Professor Binnaz Toprak believes that the percentage of Turkish population with aspirations for an Islamic state is lower than what the study suggests.
It seems like 10% of that 20% really say yes without knowing what they're asking.
According to the results of the study, the majority of the Turkish people are practicing Muslims and devout believers. However, religious belief in practice is considered to be limited to private life, and the idea of religious involvement in public life is not supported.
I think it has been remarkably successful that most people seem to have accepted a secular state as part of their everyday existence.
This absorption of secular ideals over the history of the Republic has been successful to a great extent, not due to the social engineering projects, but rather open channels of expression in different realms of life.
In the Turkish case, I think, especially seen from today, Islamism had a chance to be integrated into channels of political parliamentary system through democratic elections.
Islam and religious accommodation found expression not only in the political process through democratic elections, but also in the economic sphere.
In the 1980s also, there was a great economic transformation in Turkey. Turkey used to have this very closed economy. They didn't export very much, they didn't import very much, and that all changed in the 1980s.
With the introduction of the open market economy in Turkey, formerly marginalized social actors, including people from more conservative backgrounds, had the opportunity to take advantage of the more liberal economic system.
So you had the development of more devout Muslim business people who developed, who became quite wealthy and started holding companies and so on.
The market conditions pressured Islam to become one of the commodity to compete as a good with other diverse and different brand of Islam.
The market did an extraordinary thing. It supported, or rather it encouraged the commercialization of Islamic identity.
The evolution in the choices of Turkish women on how to dress themselves, especially in the last 2 decades, is a helpful study to understand the economic as well as social role of religion in the Turkish public life.
Kadınlarımızın, hatta bizde dindar olmayan, dinin diğer emirlerini yerine getirmeyen kadınlarımızın bile mühim bir ekseriyetinin mahalli, geleneksel ve onların takip ettiği modaya bağlı olarak hep başlarını örttüğünü görüyoruz.
So you had, for instance, you've always had people, women covering their hair, for instance, in Turkey. People in villages covered their hair with just, cotton cloths. But suddenly you had the development of an Islamic style. You started to have runways, with fashion shows of Islamic veiling, very fancy veiling. That was very fashionable.
The headscarf symbol was being transformed by these very girls who readopted it. That is the issue, because we think headscarf, the veiling represents this and this and that in history, according to Islamic law, according to Islamic practices and so on. But today the new phenomena is transforming the meanings of this Islamic veiling. That is the main issue.
You had this sort of Islamic chic that developed, Islamic fashion, and this happened in a number of different areas of life, so that religion became a form of expression as well. And it became associated with a middle-class lifestyle. So even if you weren't middle class, you could aspire by wearing the leopard print scarf and the special outfits.
Bu eşarpların şeyi nedir?
Şimdi o
Fiyatlarınız...
eşarp 90 santim efendim. O Pierre Cardin yeni sezonu 72 milyon 500.
Hı hı. Çok rağbet var mı peki? Modası var galiba bu işin artık. Değil mi?
Ya bu artık şeye gelmiş, endüstri haline gelmiş.
Endüstri haline gelmiş.
Kıyafetlerle uygun eşarp.
Hı hı.
The social significance of veiling is worth of notice aside from its personal and political connotations. At the same time, the new visibility of Islam in political, social, and economic lives causes discomfort in more secular sections of the society.
On the side of the secular modernist persons, there is a great deal of distrust, not of the people who are believing Muslims, but of the intentions behind visual symbolism of Islam, such as the headscarf.
Yet, this conservative, upwardly moving, urban middle class, including the women, still shares similar values about the secular identity of the Turkish nation-state.
This Islam as a social and political force became more visible, more public, but at the same time became more moderate.
Working on Islamist women, I think, is one of the greatest proofs that the Republican reforms have been very successful. You look at the Islamist women of Turkey, and you see that they are a kind of its own, and assimilating all these ideals that the Republic wanted to propagate, and ideals that it itself did not have too much success in, perhaps.
The Islamic traditional society found its expression in democratic discourse and democratic habit. So very strange thing happens in today. The Muslim population is much more democratic than the secular, like westernized population. They become inseparable. Islam of the Turkish way becomes inseparable from a radical need of populist democratic sentiment.
The Turkish experience with secularism provides series of insights on how to construct the relationship between religion, the state, and civil society. The question remains whether this experience can be molded into a secular model for the Muslim world.
So I'm also sure that other people will look at the Turkish quote-unquote success and will try to replicate it.
I don't think the idea of selling Turkey as a model to post-colonial Middle East is a very good idea, because Turkey is not a post-colonial. If anything, Turkey is looked upon by most of its neighboring Arab countries as a former colonizer. There isn't very much sympathy for Turkey. The way Turkey is viewed is the way England or France may be viewed.
Hoş geldiniz diyorum. Aynı zamanda bu seyahatin de
Turkey is still conceptualized as a role model by internal as well as external influence groups. The Greater Middle East Project, unofficially drafted by the United States of America, is an example for such an initiative. At the G8 conference in June 2004, Turkey participated at the talks as an observer, where G8 leaders adopted a declaration on a new partnership for progress and a common future with the region of the broader Middle East and North Africa.
As a secular, modern, social, democratic country, Turkey is the only one who will give impetus to the Greater Middle East project, which I know is on the screen to bring stability and security to the entire world by defeating the international terrorism by economy. the roles must not be dictated to Turkey. Turkey herself must select the roles in order to expedite the greater Middle East project.
Even if Turkey is allowed to freely determine its involvement as a key player within a regional development plan, the core concept still remains as a social engineering project.
Rather than being a role model, Turkish experience should be taken into account and should be taken seriously by looking at it in a sort of a historical, analytical way, so that we could also talk about ambiguities, peculiarities, tensions that experience has involved.
This historical analysis in turn offers valuable perspectives not only for a specific region of the world, but to the humanity at large. For instance, Professor Nilüfer Göle draws attention to the observation that Europe can derive relevant lessons from the Turkish experience with secularism for a pluralistic European Union future.
Europe will be defined in relation to these two issues. Muslims within Europe, that is the headscarf issue, but Muslims who are waiting at the frontier of Europe, that is Turkey. So Turkish candidacy on the one hand, and headscarf issue on the other hand, I would say are defining more and more French politics, but also German, the whole Europe.
On the global scale, Europe itself is being challenged to define an innovative, open-minded European identity with Turkey's bid to join the European Union. While Turkey is seeking to construct an open society and a tolerant state system in harmony with each other on issues such as secularism and religious rights at home.
This change and this expansion gives us a way to imagine a new Turkey in a new Europe.
It is to be seen whether lessons drawn from the Turkish case study with secularism will in fact become a common reference for other peoples of the world.
On the one hand, you have United States with terrorism, and Europe with Muslim migrants and Islam in many different configurations, and the middle of which I think Turkey, a very small actor in that, at that world level, but playing a very important, significant game for the history of all of us. Can we go beyond these clashes? Can we show that Islam and values of modernity, democracy, rationality, equality of sexes can go together or not? I think Turkey is the best candidate. I call it Islam with smiling face, with a human face.
Bunun hepsi çok yakıştı. Ahmet, teşekkürler.